You're listening to the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
All right, welcome back in. Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. We'll continue the NFL conversation. We'll also talk some MLB. Phillies, Mets, and Yankees start their season coming up on Sunday and Monday, depending on the team. So now let's go out to the hotline and welcome in someone from FanRag Sports who covers both the MLB and the National Football League, and that's John Perrotto, who's kind enough to hop on board with us right now on the Zach Gelb Show. John, appreciate a few minutes, and how are you?
Doing good, Zach. How are you?
Well, I'm doing great. So let's first start off the conversation talking baseball, and we'll start with the Mets. The expectation level for the Mets is very high, but we got to get to an off-the-field incident that did occur, and that's with Jerry's Familia. We know in October he was arrested, then the charges were dropped, and yesterday Rob Manfred comes out with the 15-game suspension. Do you think that was the right call by the MLB on giving Jerry's 15 games?
You know, that's a really tough call right now for Major League Baseball, because even if a guy isn't arrested, or I shouldn't say charged or convicted, Rob Manfred still has the power to suspend guys. And, each case is kind of different. And, I think the fact that there was no evidence that he physically hit his wife, and in the Aroldis Chapman case, of course, he brandished a gun in his situation last year. So, I think 15 games was right. I think it was to send a message, even though, that nothing physically happened. There was thankfully nothing, nobody injured, nobody hurt. But still, that when you cause that kind of disruption, that the police get called to your house, that something has to be done, and you need to be penalized. And I think it'll be a good deterrent. And I do think when I was in Mets camp this spring, talking to especially people who know Familia well, he does seem very repentant about what happened. He does feel he knows that he did wrong, and that he attended many counseling sessions, and he is willing to try to make a change in his life.
I actually like what the MLB does, because if you look at what the NFL does, they go very light on their players in terms of these incidents, and then usually more things come out. We saw what happened with Josh Brown earlier this year, and to me there was a lot of evidence, and I thought the NFL really botched that. But getting back to what the MLB does, and I read the release yesterday, and they talked about no physical violence, but his conduct was inappropriate. Don't you think they should provide a little bit more clarity on that? Because when I read something along those lines of, hey, there's no physical violence, then I ask, well, why is the guy getting 15 games? And I only see the line of that his conduct was inappropriate. I feel like they should explain that a little bit more.
Yeah, I would too. I'd like to see that. And I honestly think, and I had a chance to actually talk to Rob Manfred about this a little bit during spring training, and this is kind of their learning as they're going along with this. And, I'm not using that as an excuse, but, this is still all pretty new. This is only the second season. And I think everybody, both the Players Association and Major League Baseball is trying to strike the right balance and taking things on a case-by-case basis instead of just making a one-size-fit-all penalty, because all situations are different. And I really think right now it's a little bit of trial and error. And, I agree probably I'll say one of the things they do need to do is make it more clear what the reasoning was, why one guy gets 30 games, Jose Reyes got 60 games, and, why it is. And, hopefully in time that'll be the case as they get a little more comfortable and a little more experience of doing this, meeting these penalties out.
And there's no excuse for hitting a woman. It's just a heinous act, and any player that does that should face a severe punishment. But I do feel like my confidence in Rob Manfred of moving this thing in the right direction is correct. But then when you look at Goodell, for me, I think Goodell's done an awful job in these domestic abuse situations. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, he has. And I think Rob Manfred is much more open-minded. I think to be honest, I think Rob Manfred's just a better commissioner than Roger Goodell. And also, I want to say, I know a lot of people think the Players Association goes to extreme lengths to protect the players and make sure that nothing ever happens. But, I'll give the Players Association credit in this, too. They gave Rob Manfred free rein. They said if there's a domestic violence case or a child abuse case, you put any penalty you want to put, and we're for it. I mean, it can be appealed, but basically they're giving Manfred the power to set the penalty and none of the cases have been appealed yet, and I don't think any will be anytime soon unless there is just some compelling evidence to think that a guy was set up or somehow didn't actually do it, and I don't think that's going to be the case. So I'd also like to give both sides really work together in concert on this to make sure that this problem, they can address it and make sure that either one, it doesn't happen as much, or if it does, guys are properly punished for it.
All right, let's talk on the field baseball because we're excited for the baseball season to start this upcoming weekend and see who'll be winning it all at the end of the year. We know the Mets have a chance to do that because of their starting pitching, and we know Matz is going to be out for the start of the season and maybe even some more time. But you look at that Mets rotation, Gesellman, Wheeler, DeGrom, Harvey, and, of course, Noah Syndergaard. I know injury is the big concern, but how do you evaluate this Mets rotation?
Well, I still like it. I mean, obviously, you'd love to see the big five all together because, like Terry Collins said, beginning of spring training, give me 30 starts from all five of those guys, and I'll take my chances. But I do like their depth, and like you said, Gesellman and Lugo, though Lugo is starting AAA, but I like Gesellman, and I even like Montero, who will be at AAA. So they do have depth. Matz is a little disappointing. When I saw him pitch early in the spring, he looked really good, and he said he felt great, and I don't think they saw this coming. I know he certainly didn't think anything was coming, earlier in the exhibition season. I think everybody knows that, they're all fragile except Syndergaard, and, that the key is for them to just try to keep them as healthy as they can. But, on the other hand, I thought the one real positive was how Matt Harvey progressed as the spring went on. There was a lot of question early on when he was only throwing in the high 80s, low 90s. But when he ramped it up to 97 and 98 the other day, that shows me that he's pretty well back to health. I know DeGrom has looked good. He had a rough start, a few starts back, but for the most part, he's been really good. Syndergaard's been healthy and great. So, I think between those three and having a couple of depth pieces, I think they're going to be okay. I really do. I think I think they can challenge the Nationals. I think the Nationals are clearly the better team right now, but I think the Mets certainly are good enough to give them a battle.
If they're going to want to win the NL East and even take it a step further, get back to the World Series where they were 2 years ago, and this time win it, we all know the starting rotation is the big key. But what else has to go right for the Mets this year?
Well, they have to stay healthy position player-wise. And I think at this point, David Wright's starting the year on the DL. And he's played a total of 75 games the last 2 years. And the Mets, they're not going to say it publicly, but privately when I was in their camp, anything they get from him this year is going to be a bonus, and they know it. And, I think the key is to stay healthy. They didn't stay healthy last year, and they still got to the wild card. Lucas Duda was sidelined almost 4 months with a back ailment. Neil Walker went out early had back surgery in late August, and they both looked really good this spring at first and second base. They have Cespedes back, and, he makes a big difference for them. And the one worrisome spot for me is Curtis Granderson in center field. He's 37 years old. He's in great shape, but boy, that's a lot of ground to cover in Citi Field and center field for a guy with 37-year-old legs. And I just really wonder how much of a hit the defense is going to take with him in center. And that concerns me a little bit in a big ballpark like that.
It's also a concern, and one other concern I have with him, and he's been an essential part of this team the last 2 years, but I saw a projected lineup the other day, and they expect him to bat cleanup. I think that's a little bit bizarre for Granderson coming up for this team that they have right now.
He's had a bizarre career. I was thinking of the same thing. At one time he was a leadoff hitter in Detroit, and when he was with the Yankees, he hit eighth. And he's but the cleanup is, it is bizarre, but I don't know. I guess, Cespedes you could put there, but you really want him at 3 more than 4. I think in a perfect world, if Lucas Duda would stay healthy and consistent, he'd be a good number 4 hitter. But he has done neither over the years, so I think they feel that Granderson's probably their most safest bet. But I could also see Jay Bruce maybe eventually moving in there if he gets hot like he did at the end of last season. Of course, when he came over from the Reds, he had an awful first 4 or 5 weeks, but then he really heated up down the stretch. So if Bruce can get his swing back, I think that lineup's going to be fluid. You may even see Neil Walker in the cleanup spot at some point because I know Terry Collins really likes his power and his consistency. So I think that's going to be a very fluid situation as the year goes on.
John Perrotto with us right now, covers the MLB and the NFL for FanRag Sports. Let's take some subways over to Yankee Stadium right now, and let's evaluate the Yankees. We know their starting pitching is not strong. The bats in the lineup aren't great, but they do have some youngsters that we want to see pan out over a full 162. Your evaluation of the Yankees team right now, sir?
They're in a rebuilding, well, I guess not totally rebuilding mode, but certainly retooling mode. And I don't think they're going to contend this year. I think this is kind of a year where you kind of see what you got and figure out exactly who can play and who can't, and who's going to be a long-term piece of your future there. But I will say this: they have some pretty impressive kids. You got to like Gary Sanchez, the catcher, and certainly Greg Bird, the first baseman, has a lot of raw power, and he's had a great spring. And Aaron Judge, still work in progress in right field, but I think he will turn out to be a pretty good player. He's a massive guy at 6'7", 270, and has massive power. It's just a matter of becoming a more consistent hitter. And, I like some of their young pitchers coming up behind, not so much the guys in contention now other than Severino, who looked a lot better this year than he did last year. But I had a chance to see James Caprillion pitch an inning or two in the game, one of the games I was at this spring, and he was their number one pick out of UCLA a couple of years ago, and he looks like he's somebody who could help them by the second half of the season. Jordan Montgomery, who probably started AAA despite having a great spring. I think he'll be in position to help them at some point later in the year. And, they've got Gleyber Torres, the shortstop, Clint Frazier, outfielder, two of the best prospects in the game, will start the year off at Scranton Wilkes-Barre in AAA. So there's a bright future for them, but it seems awfully funny to write stories this spring about the Yankees' hot prospects, because it's been so long since they had many, because, as you well know, Zach, over the years, and very successfully traded most of their top prospects for veteran guys who help them win World Series or get into playoffs or win divisions. So a little bit different tact with the Yankees, but it seems to have energized Joe Girardi and Brian Cashman quite a bit, and I think they're excited to try something different, and they think they can really grow the next great Yankees team among all these kids that will either be in the majors or be knocking on the doorstep.
With Torres, can you just go a little bit more in depth with him? Because we saw the spring that he just had, batting over 400, and we know the ceiling on him. Just tell me how good of a player you think he can be.
Well, from what I saw of him, and unfortunately the two games that I saw them play on my tour around the state, he only played in one, and he only played 3 innings. So I didn't get to actually see him in game action as much as I would have liked to. But you could just tell in a little bit of time I saw him, the way he carries himself, his actions in the field, his actions at the plate, that he's special. He's a special player. And I know, talking to some of the Yankee people in the front office and some of the coaching staff, they say as great as his physical talent is, his drive, his determination, his personality is just as good. And they say, he wants to fit in. He's only a 20-year-old kid from the Dominican, yet he's already learned English pretty well, enough that he can communicate pretty well with his teammates and his coaches. And, really, you hate to say the sky's the limit, because you have seen so many prospects over the years, that everyone thought was going to be a superstar not turn out that way. But boy, unless everybody's wrong, I can't imagine that he's not going to be one of the premier shortstops in the game within the next few years. He has that much talent and that much aptitude that I don't think once he gets to the major leagues that transition period will be very long. I think it'll be very much like Carlos Correa in Houston and Francisco Lindor in Cleveland, where, they came to the majors pretty much, with their feet on the ground and running. And I think when Torres gets to the big leagues, it's going to be the same thing.
And it's really just the amount of inexperience that Torres has, because I'm pretty sure they're starting him off actually in AA in Trenton. And with him, it's just, this is the big thing right now with the Yankees. And tell me if I'm right or wrong on this, that the Yankees aren't used to being in this spot. And I call it rebuilding right now. And I thought it was the right move that they made at the deadline. But they have to have patience. And I'm a little bit concerned if the Yankees will have that patience, just because of the expectations that the owner has each and every year.
Well, I agree with you, and I had a chance to talk to Hal Steinbrenner when I was there, and also, I asked that to Joe Girardi and Brian Cashman, and they all say they will, that they know that that's what they have to do to make this thing work. And I will say this, they've done a good sales job with their fans. I mean, they've been clear about it. They've said, look, we may not be as competitive this year as people would hope us to be. We're hoping that we can integrate these young kids and still win at the same time, but we may not. And, and the other really good thing I thought, they brought the young guys to New York. A lot of teams have a winter caravan, kind of a promotional thing where they'll go around and make public appearances and have players sign autographs and try to sell some tickets for the upcoming year. Yankees never did that before this year, and they brought pretty much all their young guys in to do it and kind of get them to have the fans get familiarized with them and have their players get familiarized with New York and what it's like, life in New York. And, I think, they've certainly been up front with their fans. They've been up front with the media. And I think because of that, I think the fans will give them a little leeway. And I think the press has too. I think, even talking to some of the beat guys with the Yankees, I mean, they understand what's going on here. And I think they know that the Yankees aren't going to win the division this year, and if they do, it will be a major upset. So I don't know if there'll be that much pressure as you would think, as I would think, after being in their camp and talking to some people. I think pretty much everybody's on board with the fact that they're going that this is going to have some growing pains.
Get into the fight-ins, the Philadelphia Phillies. We know that they're clearly in a rebuilding mode, and we're seeing what Matt Klentak and Andy McPhail could do with this club right now, and this team's not going to be very competitive this year. We know that when they set the bar at a level of 500 baseball this year, as that would be something that they'd be satisfied with. But the starting rotation and the three youngsters in Eichhoff, Nola, and Velasquez that we'll see from opening day and on. With those three, who do you think has that ace potential out of those three names that I just mentioned?
I think Velasquez, when you go on pure stuff, because, we all seen what he can do on certain days, like when he struck out 16 Padres in, I guess, what is his second or third start of the year last year. The consistency's still the thing with him, but I think everybody at the Phillies, and I think anybody from outside the organization that's seen all their pitchers would agree he's got the best stuff of all their guys right now. I like Nola's steadiness better. I know he got hurt last year, and he struggled in his last 4 or 5 starts before he went on the DL at the end of July for the rest of the year. I think Nola's one of those steady guys who always pitch better than his stuff because he's very smart and he has a lot of poise. I think he's probably, I think him and Velasquez in some case won too. But, Jared Eichhoff, nobody talked about him last year, and he logged almost 200 innings and had a good year. And, I know Pete Mackanin, the manager, really, really likes him a lot. He's such a dependable guy, and, he wasn't one of the more ballyhooed of the players who came over in the Cole Hamels trade 2 years ago. There were much more highly regarded prospects who were in that trade. But he's pitched really well, and, I like the Phillies, and I know they're saying 81 and 81, and I think they're trying to keep expectations tempered. They don't want to put too much pressure on their young guys, and I don't think they want their fans to get too excited yet. But I think deep down, when talking to Pete Mackanin, who I've known for many, many, many years, going back to my days as a Pirates beat writer, and he was a manager in the minor league system, I think he thinks they're capable of a little bit more than that, but I think he just doesn't want to say it publicly for the fear of putting a little too much great expectations. But I think he feels they have a chance to be a little bit better than 500, but I think just getting back to that 500 spot will be good after having 5 straight seasons where they've been 500 or lower.
I like Pete a lot, and I really like the standards and the expectations that he does hold for the younger players, and that goes from the top to the bottom in this organization. Give me a little bit more about Pete Mackanin, because I think he's one of those. I know he doesn't have a lot of talent right now, but I believe he's a very underrated manager right now.
He is, and he's the perfect guy for that situation. I mean, they're integrating a lot of young guys. And, it's stressful for the kids breaking into the major leagues. I mean, they're all trying to prove they belong, and all of a sudden they're playing at the highest level, and it can be difficult. And Pete's a very easygoing guy. He doesn't put a lot of pressure on him. He's kind of a father figure, maybe even grandfather figure now at 64, though he probably want me to say that, grandfather. But
what, are you going to get him a cane for a birthday present next?
Hey, he's in better shape than I am, and I'm 11 years younger. And he has a wonderful sense of humor, a real wry sense of humor, and he has a way of making everybody around him feel at ease. And I know that talking to some of the players, they just love him. They appreciate how he's had their back. But at the same time, he holds them accountable. I mean, it's not like, he just continually, if they screw up, he just says, well, they're young. I mean, at some point, he tells these guys, look, it is the big leagues. You've got to produce at some point. But he does it in a way where guys don't feel like, well, I have to get 4 hits tonight or I'm never going to play again. Or, I have to go out and pitch 7 shutout innings or I'm going back to Lehigh Valley at AAA. And, he's been the perfect guy for this team. And I don't think it's a coincidence that they've gotten better ever since he took over for Ryan Sandberg, because he's done a great job, and he's waited forever. This is, I believe, his 49th year in professional baseball, between playing and managing and coaching. And he's I can't say enough about him. He's a wonderful guy, and I'm happy he got the opportunity, and I'm even more happy that he has shown that what he can do with this opportunity. And I think even if he's not the manager by the time the Phillies really get good again, as he is getting a little older, I think that he'll be somebody people will look back on and say, boy, he, in his own way, he played a pretty big hand to get the Phillies back to where they used to be.
John Perrotto, last one before we let you run, who covers the MLB and the NFL for FanRag Sports. Let's squeeze in one NFL point. The last few days, we've really been trying to get the pulse of the fan base, and if they feel the Eagles are moving in the right direction. We know they have the quarterback, but in terms of Howie Roseman and Doug Peterson, that's something the fans have uneasy feelings about, and it's a very two different opinions. Some people love them, some people don't like them. Where's your confidence in the Howie and Doug regime right now?
I like what they've done this winter. I mean, certainly they've made the team better, and I think they have the quarterback without a doubt. I like Doug Peterson. I think, I really believe, and I realize the NFL more than ever is what win now league, but I think, in a guy in Doug Peterson's situation with a brand new quarterback last year, you need to exercise some patience. And I think on the whole, and I know this season was a little disappointing at times, I think you need to give them at least another year or two to see what they can do together. But I like what they've done in free agency. They certainly, filled some pretty big holes that they had on their team. And I think on paper they look better. And, I'd like to see Doug Peterson have a second year in his second year as coach, and Wentz in his second year now. I think there's going to be improvement by both. And, I think things are looking up for them. I'm not ready to say they're going to the Super Bowl next year, but I think they'll be more consistent than they were a year ago. They'll, Wentz will have some more weapons to work with, which will help. And I think Doug Peterson's a pretty sharp guy, and I think he probably learned quite a bit of lessons, good and bad, in his first year. And, usually you see coaches get better in their second year. So I like the way they're going, and I think they're going to be improved.
To me, the timetable is you gave him last year, he gets this year, and I'm talking about Howie and Doug, and then they also get one more year. And then going into year number 4, if you don't feel like they could win a Super Bowl, then you got to move on. But the interesting dynamic here that you could throw in is if Hardball gets fired by the Ravens this year after missing the playoffs 3 straight years, if they do that, if he becomes available, you're going to have a lot of fans imploring for them to go get Hardball.
And I probably would think about it, especially if the Eagles don't show improvement. I mean, if they level off or just show a bit of improvement, then, yeah, I would do it. But I think if they take a big step forward, it'd be kind of hard at that point to fire Peterson. But, yeah, certainly the scepter of that, if John Hardball is kind of hanging over. And, yeah, if they don't show improvement next year, I think it definitely would be a no-brainer if the Ravens were firing him to bring Hardball in. But I really think the Eagles are going to be better, but certainly that's a good backup plan if they're not.
John, we appreciate the time. Thank you. This is great.
Oh, thanks a lot, Zach. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.